Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the True North Report, news that every Canadian needs to know. So, unlike last time I was on here, I actually have a lineup of what I want to talk about today, and it's a little bit of everything. It's covering a little bit of what's going on in America, going to be covering a lot what's going on here in Canada. But the main thing I want to start off today is this story is. It's hard to say whether it's just some crazy blog that was put out there in order to try and push an idea for views, or whether there's some legitimacy to it. But as you could probably tell already from the headline of this video, you know what I'm going to be talking about. And it has this idea that there's going to be martial law in the US after Christmas. Now, this is something that I didn't come across it on my own. I only came across it because I like to watch, some of you may know the YouTube channel out there, High Impact Vlogs, originally High Impact Flicks, and the person on there, the host of the YouTube channel, Brian, I believe his name is, he actually ended up bringing this story to my attention, and I have a lot of skepticism of whether this is true or not, but if there's any relevance to the story itself, then it's quite concerning for the state of affairs inside of America right now. So, it's this website right here, Freedom for Humanity, and in there they end up posting what was from it appears to be some sort of something from a Facebook page from December 16th, 2018. And I'm sure, yeah, you could be able to see this right now. I'll just zoom in a little bit, make it a little bit bigger for everyone. So, as it says here, it says, please share this information far and wide. It is legit, and it comes from a source in direct contact with the military. The generals are counting on our teams to communicate this to the public. I will say that the information about extra supplies was not part of this morning's message. However, we have continuously heard from this from many military sources, so it seems to like good information to include in the meme. Anyone doubting the validity and propose of our team should find General Flynn's Digital Soldiers video. And in this video that they're talking about with General Flynn, he makes reference to how they have digital soldiers, not quite literal soldiers, but he's actually talking about the people who post online, things such as memes, people who are on their side, the mega people as one of the big ones that they're talking about, not so much as actual soldiers. But it says, if there is anything nefarious, the military would not warn us ahead of time. They are controlling this. President Trump is not trying to be a dictator. He is trying to keep us safe. If this idea is new to you, research. We have huge amount of information as to why this is occurring compiled for you. This is a message directly from the military generals to the people of the U.S. Please share far and wide. The military is invoking emergency martial law after Christmas. The authorization for this action is based on two existing laws. The Insurrection Act of 1807 was put in place to control a violent uprising against an authority or government. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 was passed to protect against threats to the economy or the people in the USA. Total martial law will include curfews to keep you safe. Guidelines and instructions will be communicated clearly. This is the first time in our country's history that a president will be given full power to control all acts of terrorism from within our borders. Donald J. Trump was the man chosen by the military to do this job. Do not be afraid. We simply ask that you are prepared for any resulting interruption of services by having extra food, extra water, medication, pet food, cash. Why? Should tensions arise, it is important that you and your family have the ability to stay out of the way. The military has sworn an oath of allegiance to our president and to keep the citizens of the USA safe. So it's unclear where this comes from, as in, is this something to do with Q? Is this part of the QAnon movement? Is this just somebody trying to get their views on their page by putting out something that seems pretty preposterous? I have a lot of reservations as to why I believe this is true. One of the main ones is there's nothing right now that would warrant a martial law being enacted in the United States. Because even what they laid out there, they said it had to do with any force that is going up against the government or anything that considered is a danger to the economy of America. None of this is in danger right now, unless there's some sort of uprising that's being planned that we have not been told about. then there's no reason for this to be put into place. And even if we're talking about what's going on between America and China right now, their trade war and their tariff war that is going on, this is still not the biggest threat to America's economy. So it seems clear to me, especially because they added in that his has to do something to do with Q. And the QAnon thing, I've really sort of stayed on the outside of that because I don't know if I can trust it. See, the whole thing about the QAnon is it originally started up in like 4chan, 8chan, that sort of thing, and then made its way out to Facebook, Twitter, although apparently Q himself only ever really posts on the 4chan or 8chan, but never any account that you see on Twitter or Facebook or any of these social media accounts are people who are relaying the message. Some of my concerns when it comes to the QAnon thing has to do with we don't know who this is. We don't know what the end goal is, even though they say things such as they're there to overthrow the deep state, they're there to overthrow the globalists. We don't know this for a fact, and it relies a lot on faith. That really is what this comes from. It comes from faith that this person is who they say they are, and they're actually doing what is good for the people. Also, Q has in the past talked about how it's like the military itself is actually a friend of the nation. I don't really necessarily believe I trust this because we know about the military-industrial complex. They get their funding based on being able to go to war, being able to be active all over the world. Without it, there's no reason for all this money to get funneled into the U.S. military. So to say that it's actually on the side of the people doesn't make sense to me. It seems to me like, I'm not saying that they're against the people, but I think they act in their own self-interest. So take this as you will. Take it with a big grain of salt is what I would recommend. I don't believe that we will see after Christmas there will be martial law enacted, and I actually think that if this is true, if there's any truth to this whatsoever, then Q has greatly underestimated the people that he appeals to in the U.S. He appeals to the right wing. When the left wing had nothing to do with them, especially because Q has proven himself to be a big Donald Trump fan, a big Donald Trump supporter, talking about how Donald Trump was elected in order to return America to previous prosperity, overthrow the elites and the deep state. But then at the same time, he's surrounded himself with military generals, and we see how, when it comes to this idea of globalism, the deep state, we know that Israel plays a big part in this. A lot of the spying that the American intelligence agencies do, it gets transported to Israel, and yet Donald Trump has been extremely buddy with Benjamin Netanyahu and members of Israel, and this includes the fact that Jared Kushner has been friends with Benjamin Netanyahu his whole life. So I do believe that Trump, when he came in, he did want to do things that would make America better, make America great again, to use his slogan. But I do believe that he was put in place there by the Zionists. He was put in there by the Zionists in order to further their end goals. Because as we look into who is running this world, who is pulling the strings behind the scenes, we can see that the Zionists have big pull there. But anyway, I do believe that this is not going to come to pass. I do believe that once Christmas is done, it will be life as normal. And even if it was some sort of martial law that was put in place, even if Trump is there to try and make America great again, I don't trust any man with this amount of authority. Now, this wouldn't really affect me too much because, well, obviously I'm Canadian. But I do fear for our American brothers down there that if Donald Trump was given full authority, that he would then manipulate the world into the way he wants, that this would be too much power for one man to hold, and because of it, it would actually lead to terrible results. The other thing is since they're appealing so much to the right wing of the vote, these are the people who are considered America's civilian army. They're the ones who are armed. Do you think they're going to take this martial law laying down? I think you would see many people rise up against the U.S. government and the U.S. military, probably fighting some sort of guerrilla war against them, because it's not in America's nature to want to have this much control. They always have been a country that was based on freedoms and giving giving liberty to the individual. So if this is what Donald Trump's going to do, I think a lot of his base would actually turn on him, and it would actually see some sort of civil war in effect between the citizens of America and the military itself. But we'll just have to wait and see what's going on. We got our own problems up here in Canada, so I don't want to sit here and talk to you too much about this idea of martial law in the U.S. Because up here in Canada, as many people know, we have right now a few citizens, about 3 now, that have been detained in China. And this is most likely has to do with the fact that the chief financial officer of Huawei, or however you pronounce it, I think it's Huawei, ended up getting arrested while here in Canada, and that was because at the recommendation of our American counterparts, it was the Department of Justice that asked us in order to enact this arrest because this woman, I can't remember her name right now, it's a bit of a difficult name, she ended up, the company itself and her were trying to circumvent some of the sanctions that America had put in place against Iran. Now, I'm not 100% sure as to what exactly these sanctions they were trying to overturn were, or for what reason. My guess it has something to do with selling their product. But since this has ended up happening, we have seen inaction on the part of our Prime Minister to do anything about it. And I think this article from the Post-Millennial was pretty scathing towards Justin Trudeau and what he has done so far to try and get these Canadians out of detention in China. Actually, ironically enough, China itself had said that the arrest of the CFO of Huawei, it means that her human rights have been infringed on. But then this is coming from a country that has consistently in the past been one of the biggest disruptors of human rights in its own country and its own people. It puts its people under huge censorship, and then it's going to turn around and say Canada is infringing on their human rights. So the irony there is so thick you cut it with a knife. But anyway, as this goes on to say, it says, if you're Canadian and happen to be going overseas this holiday season, be very cautious. Just know that if you happen to get in some sort of incident, get arrested, or thrown in jail unfairly, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau does not care. He won't even bother to ask you. Speaking to Mercedes Stephenson from the West Block, Trudeau responded, no, quote, no, I have not reached out to speak when asked about 3 Canadian citizens who have been detained for dubious reasons by the Chinese government. Michael Kovrig, Michael Spavor, and 1 unnamed individual have been detained by Chinese authorities in what many are speculating as a retaliatory move for Canada's arrest and detention of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou. That's the name, Meng Wanzhou. Now, according to Justin Trudeau, I should say, is that the third person who has been detained is not connected to Huawei whatsoever, but the first 2 seems pretty obvious that it is. And it said, yeah. And so this is making reference, and as I already stated, it's that the PM has not spoken to President Xi, or however you pronounce it. I'm terrible when it comes to Asian names. He has not spoken to President Xi about this situation whatsoever, or to get our Canadians freed from there. I mean, there was actually reasons to arrest Meng Wanzhou, or whatever the hell her name was, the Huawei CFO. There were reasons to arrest her because she had actually violated American law, and it was our closest allies that asked us to make the arrest for them. And then we're supposed to be extraditing her to the U.S. in order to face charges, and they're going to be pretty severely charges. Right now, she's out from Canadian jail on a $10 million bail. But we've seen how China they've been really pissed off about this. They've threatened that our businesses and our trade will see repercussions from the arrest of this. And I just think it's a little ironic because China has a tendency to go to other countries and kidnap its nationals. This is something that was actually released a while back. And let me see if I can find it because I forgot to pull it up. Let me see here. But anyway, as this article goes on to state that we're going to see, is that a number of A number of Chinese nationals who have emigrated to other countries and are staying in other countries have had China come over and arrested by their government officials and taken back to China forcefully. Okay, I think I know where to find it now. So this is a little ironic that China is being so hard against us that they're criticizing us. That they're criticizing Canada for violating human rights and making an arrest against a Chinese national when they are constantly doing the exact same thing, only they're doing it from foreign countries. Now, whenever this is the case, whenever there is a situation where this needs to happen, what's always happened has been that you get in contact with the local authorities, and then from there, they administer the arrest, and then they export them to you. But this is not what's going on right now. China is actually bringing its people in. So here we go. This is from Spencer Fernando, but he makes reference to the actual article where this ends up happening. It says, Western intel officials say kidnappings are increasingly occurring in the territory of core U.S. allies, including some of the Five Eyes intelligent partners, United States, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. A disturbing article in The Week reveals a growing number of U.S. intel officials about China's kidnapping Chinese nationals among Western allies, including the U.S. Quote, Chinese nationals living in the United States have also begun to disappear under suspicious circumstances, although unlike previous targets, they were not high-profile folks, said another U.S. intelligence official. This is because earlier in the article, they were making reference to how a lot of the people who ended up getting arrested were high-profile people, but then this started to go down to people who really had not much to do with what they were originally talking about. This came down to just your average Chinese national who moved away. And this is the article right here. It's from March 29th, 2018. So I just brought this up because it's ironic that they're making such a fuss when it comes to this, but then the fact that we arrested one person when they're doing that exact same thing, and when it comes to Canadians, they're even upping the ante and arresting 3 of ours, and there may even be more. But as I've highlighted a few things here, Beijing has openly admitted to repatriating more than 3,000 people who had escaped overseas since 2012. A Chinese-Canadian billionaire was snatched from his hotel in Hong Kong in 2017 and was loaded, likely sedated, into a wheelchair and rolled out through the lobby with a sheet covering his head. Similar stories have also come out from Australia, a U.S. intelligence partner, including one about a man who is allegedly drugged by Chinese security forces and transported back to the mainland on a state-owned shipping vessel. Chinese nationals living in the United States have also begun to disappear under suspicious circumstances, although, unlike previous targets, they were not high-profile folks. So that's what they were making reference to when we're talking about this. But it's situations like this where we need leadership. It's situations like this when our government should be standing up for its citizens who are falsely incarcerated in another country, yet this is not what our government is doing whatsoever. And you remember, just a minute ago, I said there may be more. This ended up just coming out from the Toronto Star today. Today. Hundreds of Canadians held by Chinese raised stakes for Trudeau's government. Around 200 Canadians are currently detained in China for a variety of reasons, the Star has learned. The staggering number paints a worrisome picture of what it is at stake for the federal Liberal government and for many individuals abroad and their family here when it comes to dealing with Beijing's newly aggressive posture towards Canada. It also highlights how carefully Canada must tread as it navigates an explosive international trade and security dispute between China and U.S., at whose request Canada arrests the high-profile Chinese Huawei executive. And this is also another thing right now that's kind of pissing me off about the way Donald Trump is going about this whole situation, is the fact that we were asked by the American authorities in order to investigate people, the Department of Justice, American Department of Justice, the one who asked Canada to arrest this CFO of Huawei. But then Donald Trump is saying he might weigh in if it gives him sway over the Chinese market when it comes to this trade deal, these tariff deals that they're going through with China at this very moment. In fact, it was the same day that Donald Trump met with President Xi in order to discuss these tariffs and sort of put a halt to it, was the same day that the CFO ended up getting arrested. It was December 1st. But now he's saying he may intervene in Canada in order to try, if it gives them a heads up when it comes to this trade deal. So what are we supposed to do? Because we got the Chinese demanding her release. We've got the Americans demanding that we send him over to her. And now when we most likely would side with Donald Trump, he's starting to say he may intervene if it's to his advantage. So what the hell are we supposed to do at this point? But that's really a problem for the government to solve, because my main concern is with these Canadians who are being imprisoned over in China. Now, of these 200 that was brought up in the Toronto Star article, it's likely that at least a few of them have been arrested due to breaking Chinese law, and they are criminals. But I don't believe that every single one has actually been proven, that every single one is warranted, and that the Chinese people have been doing this for some time, but they're ramping it up now too, as in response to the CFO of Huawei getting arrested. And the thing is right now Huawei has been accused of spying on foreign nations. This is coming from the Five Eyes. This is coming from Canada, US, UK, New Zealand, Australia. These are the Five Eyes, and of that, Australia, New Zealand, and I think the US are countries that have refused to let Huawei do anything, touch any of their new fifth generation technology, 5G. Canada and I believe the UK, I know Canada for a fact, are to the two countries of the Five Eyes that are still allowing Huawei to make changes to our 5G technology. This is a dangerous precedent. This is one of the problems when it comes to the Chinese, is that they are constantly spying on foreign nations, even their allies, to a huge degree. Now, you can make this accusation on just about any superpower out there. America does a lot of the same thing. Canada has done this to the US as well. So it's not like nobody is ever not guilty of this. But the reason why it's more dangerous is because China does not represent our interests. China only stands for itself. At least when it comes to America, we've got similar culture, similar values. So this would actually be beneficial to Canada too over China. That we actually want America to stay on as the world superpower rather than China gain advantage to it, because you can believe that we're on the receiving end of the stick on that one if that takes place. If we're being spied on, I have reason to believe that our information is safer in the US than it would be in China. And this is not the first time that something like this has happened. In fact, many Chinese nationals, especially those who come over from China and are engaged in things such as engineering or anything to do with technology, they've been found out that they are actually Chinese spies, that they have been sent over and they're engaging in education here in order to find out what is the state of our technology over here, whatever that happens to be. So this is the dangers of doing it. The Chinese businesses, especially the biggest businesses, are an extension of the Chinese government arm. But now, you will have the Prime Minister will not stand up for you. No matter what happens, you're on your own. They will do very little to actually get you back. All it will do is what the Liberal government always does, is they'll wag their finger and say, you can't do that, but that's not doing anything to actually help Canada. And also another thing that just came out today is that, now this one is again sort of like the very first story I talked about. I'm going to take this one with a bit of a grain of salt, but I do believe it most likely to be true. And it's Canada among targets of alleged Chinese hacking campaign. This is outright cheating and theft, and it gives China an unfair advantage. This was from the Canadian Press. Just give me 1 second, just having a quick drink. So, companies in Canada were among the targets of two Chinese citizens charged with waging an extensive hacking campaign to steal valuable data over many years, U.S. authorities say. In an indictment unsealed Thursday, prosecutors say Zhu Hua and Zhang Shilong were acting on behalf of China's main intelligence agency to pilfer information from several countries. Beginning about 4 years ago, Zhu and Zhang waged an intrusion campaign to gain access to computers and networks of managed service providers for businesses and governments around the world, the indictment says. Such providers are private firms that manage clients' information by furnishing servers, storage, networks, consulting, and information technology support. Breaking into one such computer system can provide a route into multiple customers' data. The hackers breached the computers of enterprises involved in activities ranging from banking and telecommunications to mining and healthcare, say the papers filed in the U.S. District Court. Now, I do believe this story to be true. The only reason that I say take it with a grain of salt is the fact that this is coming from the U.S. authorities right now. And with everything that we're going through with Huawei, I wouldn't be surprised if this would be a way for the U.S. to leverage some advantage over us. Because with everything that Donald Trump has said and what I've already talked about, when it comes to whether what's going to happen with the CFO, is she going to get exported to the U.S.? Is she going to get sent back to China? What's going to happen? Is that I could see that with Donald Trump's intervention right now, that this could be seen as a problem to U.S. authorities, such as the Justice Department, who are worried that instead of handing her over to face a trial in America for violating the Iran sanctions, especially because this would be, if she was found guilty, this would come with about 30 years in prison. It's very stiff sentence and a long time in prison if she's found guilty. That they're trying to look for any reason in order to make sure that we hand them over, and this would be one good way. Because there's that already idea that Huawei is accused of spying. We already know that several Canadians have been held in captivity in China, and now just from the Toronto Star article, we find out that hundreds more are being held there. And now we find out that that we've been hacked. We're part of one of the groups that got hacked by China. This would sort of be the nail in the coffin to ensure that Canada hands her over to the U.S. Now, my point of view, we should hand her over to the U.S. U.S. is our biggest trading partner. They're our closest ally. And they're our neighbor. They're right next to us. I guess in this world today, when you can really go to any part of the world in just a matter of hours, it's not even that significant anymore. But the fact that they're our closest allies, our biggest trading partner, I think that's one reason that we should hand them over to the U.S. In order to face justice for violating the Iran sanctions. Although China is our second biggest trading partner, so this is going to hurt. One way or another, this is going to hurt, but I would rather be warmer with the U.S. than to China. Because China a lot of times uses our trade in order to dump a lot of their products into our markets. And one way this has happened has been the steel industry, is that through trade, they've been able to dump a lot of their cheap steel into our market, and then they're making the profit. I mean, this was actually some of the allegations for why Donald Trump wanted to put a tariff on Canadian steel, was that a lot of the steel in our market was being traded, which is the cheap Chinese steel. And the Chinese steel market right now is huge. It's a lot bigger than either Canada or America's. So between the two, let's hand her over to the U.S. and wash our hands of it. And then we'll just sort of lick our wounds from whatever happens with China. That would be my recommendation. All right. So now we're going to get into our next story. And this one is going to be going a little far, digging a little deeper into what we're seeing on the surface. So as many of you know, that we have a deal with Saudi Arabia right now. We send them armored vehicles, and they're giving us a shit ton of money over it. Now, between our spat with Saudi Arabia this past summer, and just Saudi Arabia and their records on human rights and treatment of women and other such things, a lot of Canadians don't want to do business with them right now. A lot of Canadians want this deal for armored vehicles to stop, especially with as the stories are coming out from what's going on in Yemen and how it's been pretty much a genocide of the Yemenis people, and this has included children as well. That they're pretty much got the whole country surrounded and no food can really get in. So it's been a pretty awful situation for those in Yemen. And I believe this is still going on. It's actually been a while since I've checked up on the Yemen war. But we do know that there is famine as well, and it appears that it is. From 2015 to present. Yeah. And the reason for this actually is because if I'm remembering correctly, is that Saudi Arabia and Iran are the two regional powers over there. And because of that, they're fighting for influence over the Middle East. Now, the reason that Saudi Arabia ended up going over into Yemen, I believe, is because the new government that came into power in I believe it was 2015, maybe it was 2014, is that this was supposed to be a government that was a puppet to Iran. Now, Iran and Saudi Arabia don't like each other. And Yemen sits right on the border of Saudi Arabia, so Saudi Arabia went in because of this. I'm sure there's more to it than just that. I'm just sort of giving you the very brief overview. I don't want to spend too much time on it. But this is the main reason, one of the main things that led to Saudi Arabia invading Yemen. So we have this deal, and our armored vehicles are being used right now in Yemen. So we have a deal where we are creating and giving out armored vehicles to the Saudi Arabia, and then in turn they are using those armored vehicles to commit these atrocities in Yemen and this famine that's going on. It's not something to be proud of. In fact, actually, Canada in this area, has now become the second biggest arms dealer because of it. We're going to touch on that in just a little bit. But anyway, Saudi Arabia is $1.8 billion in arrear to Canadians in arm deal. Debt is another complicating factor in controversial contract analysis says. Now, this is something that Justin Trudeau and his government have not really been keen to talk about. They have been trying to avoid it as much as possible, and they don't really want to pull out of the deal because we're making billions of dollars in doing this. Saudi Arabia is paying us huge amounts of money, and this is also why they've been trying, whenever anyone's talking about pulling out of the Saudi Arabia arms deal, they're saying it's going to cost Canada billions of dollars. But we just found out when it says $1.8 billion in arrears, that means that Saudi Arabia is $1.8 billion behind payment for these vehicles. Says a financial report from the Crown Corporation that acts as broker between Saudi Arabia and General Dynamics Land Systems show the kingdom has fallen behind on payments to the tune of about $1.8 billion. According to the report from a Canadian commercial corporation, trade receivables increased from slightly less than $1 million to $1.8 billion in less than a year. Trade receivables are considered past due when the payer has failed to make the payment by the contractual due date, the report says. The significant increase in the past due date trade receivable is mostly attributed to the ABP contract. ABP refers to the Armored Brigade program, which is part of the deal to supply armored vehicles, equipment, and training to the Saudi government over 14 years. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, in an interview that aired December 16th, said for the first time that he was looking for a way out of the deal. For the first time. Now, we'll end up seeing if this is exactly what ends up happening out of it. But we should have been pulling out of this deal a long time ago. Saudi Arabia is not one of those countries that we should be warming up to. But this is something that we have to deal with, the fact that we are responsible for sending our armored vehicles over there. Ironically enough, we're building all these vehicles and sending them to Saudi Arabia, and we can't even build a few more modern-day armored vehicles for our own military to actually be competent, because so many of our armored vehicles are just so old. That's the problem with the Canadian military right now, is lack of resources. We've been hearing about how members of the armed forces have to buy their own boots. We've been hearing about how they have to return rucksacks because there's just not enough to go around. But we also have, when it comes to our armored vehicles, they're decades overdue for new ones, or they're still waiting to be fixed up just because we don't have the resources or the people put into it to actually deal with this situation. but Canada should pull out right now. But I think one of the reasons is that the Trudeau government has waited till now, has only recently started to say that they'll pull out, is because it's being manipulated behind the scenes by other members of his government. And I think the thing is Justin Trudeau doesn't want to pull out of the agreement because as Justin Trudeau has his masters. That is pretty well established that he has people that he answers to. He might be the leader of our country. Well, technically the Queen is the leader of our country, but you know what I mean. As a leader of our parliament, he's the leader of our nation. He still has his masters to answer to. These masters can include the Aga Khan, they include George Soros, and a few others. But when we look at this international cabal of people who are manipulating the world into be what they want, the Saudi government is part of that. It really is. The House of Saud has consistently been, if you want to call them the conspiracy theorists, they've consistently talked about how the House of Saud is also working with the Zionists in order to turn the world into their own image. The whole point of this, it's different goals in the end. I'm still trying to figure this all out, so I'm not necessarily the best person to come to get a good understanding of what the end goal is. But as I understand, they each have their own goals, such as the Zionists. The Zionists want to own what was old Israel back in the day, which goes from the Euphrates River down to the River Nile. Now they only have a fraction of that, and in the end, they're trying to make sure that they can reclaim all that land, which they believe to be the real Israel. This also goes towards the Third Temple prophecy, which is building the temple on the Temple Mount. But problem is, right there stands the Dome of the Rock, which is one of Islam's very holistic sites. Not the most holistic, but it's one of them. I think it's like third or fourth. So there's a problem, but the end goal for them is to reclaim what is Israel and then rebuild the Third Temple, although when it comes to the Third Temple, it's supposed to come with an apocalyptic war. Now, when it comes to Saudi Arabia seems to be shekel whores. They just seem to be people that want money. So I believe their goal is to claim as much of the Middle East, more importantly, as much of the oil-producing nations as they can. And they've installed their puppets all over the world in order to do this. This is why, even though Donald Trump, I believe, is trying to do what's good for America, he's still a Zionist puppet. We know that what's his name? George Soros is Trudeau's master. One of them, at least. Now, the thing is, before I go any further into this, is I want to explain what I believe is going on in the world. And this is just my theory. You can take it or leave it. But I believe that in the world, we are seeing a secret war that is playing out. The secret war is taking place between the Zionists and the Marxists. This is sort of what is the significance between Israel and, say, the UN, is that the Marxists are trying to install what is it's a socialist society that they're trying to create. But this is also why we're seeing so much push for Islamization in these countries such as Canada. Canada right now has a government, it has a leader that is a puppet to the Marxists. And then on the other side, we have the Zionists, and that's sort of like where Donald Trump is sitting. He is, at least in some way, a puppet for the Zionists. And this is exactly what the neocons are as well, because they just have unruly support for Israel. It's absolutely unbelievable how much support is for them. So after the fall of the Soviet Union, which was many people who brought the Soviet Union into reality were Jewish, but they weren't necessarily, I don't believe that they were actually very pro-Israel. They were just pro-Jewry, pretty much. So what I believe is playing out is as time's gone on and we reach the modern day, is you have these two sides. You got someone like George Soros. George Soros has actually full out said that he's not a Zionist. He doesn't support Israel whatsoever. But at the same time, he's pushed for open borders. He's pushed for immigration. He's pushed and he's even said that he is conducting research to try and silence critics of Islam. And then on the other side, that's where we see the Zionists. So that's where we stand, and each side are fighting it out. We've got people like Soros against the Rothschilds, and I believe that they work together for when it's convenient for them, but aside from that, they have different goals, and they're trying to achieve different options. So this is just my crazy idea as to what's going on out there. You can agree with me, you can disagree with me, you can call me insane, you can call me crazy, whatever you want. But as I'm looking more into it, this is where it seems to be going. Because I just don't see it as one way or the other. People who say it's all the Zionists, I think they're right on that, but I don't think they're focusing on too much on one side. Is that it is the Zionists, but then why do people like George Soros exist who are pushing for against the idea of Zionism, against the idea of Israel, but they still play a significant role behind the scenes? And this is this is where the conclusion I've come to. It's not my final conclusion for sure, because I still have lots of more research to do before I can definitively say that this is what's going on. But this is where I bring it up. This is why I bring it up, is with everything that's going on with Saudi Arabia. Even though Canada's having its spats with Saudi Arabia, we're never going to actually break away from them. I mean, we still import hundreds of millions of dollars of their oil every month. We're still going to be sending them their armored vehicles for a long time. I suspect that Justin Trudeau is going to say that he's trying to look for ways out. Oh, but we can't do it. And he'll probably use the excuse he's already given, saying that it just costs too much money in order to pull out of this deal. But I spoke a few minutes ago about how most of this is being manipulated behind the scenes by members of his party. And I'm going to name names. Just give me 1 second for a quick drink. There are two names in particular that I think are playing a significant role in this. And the first one, and the biggest player, is, I believe, this man. Oh, you know what? I should probably switch the screens. Is this man, Omar Alghabra. I'm just going to call him Omar Alghabra, because it's going to be a lot easier. So who is this man? He is the MP for Mississauga Centre. He's a parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, specializing in consular affairs. He is a former president of the Canadian Arab Federation and was a senior policy advisor to Justin Trudeau. He's actually also been a lifelong friend of Justin Trudeau. So with these sort of people, we've proven in the past that they have big pull with Justin Trudeau. A good example would be Gerald Butts. Gerald Butts has just been going all around. He was part of Kathleen Wynne's cabinet, and we saw the destructive policies that were there. And now he's sitting with Justin Trudeau in federal politics, and we see a lot of the similar destructive policies that are going on there. But what is important for you to know about this man, Omar Alghabra, is that, just so we're clear, I'm well aware his last name's not pronounced Algebra, but that's what I'm calling him. So what's important about Omar Alghabra is that he is actually born in Syria, but he grew up in Saudi Arabia. I think that's a very significant point, especially because it seems like a lot of these people in Trudeau's cabinet, when they don't originate from Canada, they seem to have ulterior motives into what they're doing. Take Ahmed Hussein, who is a Somali. He was born in Somalia, raised there, moved to Canada, then became a citizen, part of our government. Now, what's concerning about that is that if you look at the numbers, Canada has been, since Justin Trudeau came in office, have been taking in a lot more Somalians than we ever did before. And we already know some of the dangers about that, is that Somalia is already a very dangerous area, full of pirates. But even on top of that, the average Somali IQ is something like 70. That's the average. So when you look at how IQ plays a factor in certain people, is one thing is the lower IQ, the more prone you are to violence. So this is some of the dangers. But we see how our Somali-born Minister of Immigration is importing more Somalis. And he's even said that when he's done in politics, he's going back to Somalia to work as a lawyer to help Somalis who want to move to Canada. So even when he's not in office, he's still going to be doing everything he can in order to make sure that Somalians can move to Canada. Now, I believe this is the same sort of thing with Omar Alghabra. I believe that he is doing what is right, not for the Canadian people, but for his country of origin. And this is actually why I support the idea that only Canadian-born people can be a part of government. That only people that were born in this country, raised in this country, can actually run for government. And anybody who was born in another nation, you can come over here. You can get your citizenship, but you can't run for office. In fact, that's actually one of the requirements when it comes to the presidency, is that somebody born in another nation, it doesn't matter when they moved. If they were born in another nation, moved to America, even if they were like one, and then became an American citizen, they cannot run for the presidency. So Omar Alghabra, I believe, is the main person running behind the scenes in order to push this forward. Now, I do believe that they have some others as well. I do believe that someone like Iqra Khalid is also playing her role in this, but the main one is Omar Alghabra because of his connection to Saudi Arabia as well as his connection to Justin Trudeau. You can guarantee that Justin Trudeau was handpicked by political elites in order to run this party and become the prime minister. And this is why in the past, even though I try and I'm not the best at it, I've talked about this is sort of the problem with the binary political system, the left versus the right. And even though I try and displace myself from that as much as possible, I still see that I do fall into that category from time to time. I fall into the left versus right. But the main reason is because that I'm trying to get off of doing this, trying to get out of the left versus right paradigm, is because of reasons like this. Is you have on one side, you have people like Justin Trudeau who have been handpicked and sold out to foreign entities, foreign billionaires. And then on the other side, you have someone like Stephen Harper who did a lot of the same thing. I mean, Harper was the one who signed Agenda 2030. He signed Canada on to Agenda 2030, and now Justin Trudeau is just continuing that. The Paris Climate Agreement was part of Agenda 2030. The Global Compact for Migration was part of Agenda 2030. So this is supposed to be... Harper considered himself a populist, but is this doing what's right for the people? Not at all. Selling out to the UN is the wrong way to go. And that's the thing, too. If Harper was on the right, what the hell is he doing selling out to the Marxist UN? The Marxist Islamist UN. All right. Let's see what else I got for you when it comes to this guy, Omar Alghabra. So it even we got here where it says, meet Canada's Saudi-born political advisor shaping Trudeau's foreign policy. Omar Alghabra bats off criticism over Ottawa's huge arms deal with Saudi Arabia and allegation of Islamist links. I'm not going to take his word for it, but definitely when he talks about allegation of Islamist links, because this is something that Iqra Khalid has talked about. It's like, oh, you're calling me extremist? Well, you're just doing it because you're Islamophobic and racist. But then we can actually trace back. We can trace her all the way back to having connection to the Muslim Brotherhood. So it doesn't matter what they say, and they're just fucking liars, every single one of them. And I have no doubt that it's the same thing. Unfortunately, I haven't had enough time to trace him back. I actually started only really getting into this a little more before I came and started to record. So I'll have to come back another day and see if I can trace back Omar Alghabra back to some sort of extreme Islamist group, but I think we can actually trace him a little bit back to some. As this goes on to say, born to Syrian parents but raised in Saudi Arabia, Alghabra moved to Canada when he was 19 to study mechanical engineering. Let's see, and then we're skipping through a little bit. Alghabra's boss, Trudeau, has found himself embroiled in controversies around the sale of military equipment to Saudi Arabia and other rich Arab states. In recent months, sales have soared, and Canada is now the world's second biggest arms dealers in the region, behind the U.S. That's saying a lot, and I did quickly bring that up earlier at the beginning of this, that we are now second when it comes to arms dealers. This is not supposed to be what Canada was about. We came to militarization, and this is not something that Justin Trudeau presented himself about. Remember, he was the one who pulled the Canadian CF-18 jets out of the fight with ISIS. Now, why do you think he did that? The thing is about that is that we were already committed, and we had allies that were relying on us, and when we pulled out our jets, they suddenly were left with their dicks hanging in the wind, because the Canadian jets were providing cover for a lot of the Iraqis and a lot of our allies on the ground, a lot of their ground troops. So when you pulled that out, they had to rework the way that was going to work. I think France also had some jets in there. I think the UK, and then America. So then they've got to rework out on how this is going to go down. So he pulled them out of the fight, and then he starts inviting these terrorists home. This should say all you need to know about Justin Trudeau. But anyway, going on. According to new findings by IHS Janes, a defense industry publisher that tracks military spending, Canada's rise from 6th to 2nd place comes on the heels of Canada's $15 billion sale of combat vehicles to Riyadh earlier this year. So what I think Canada should actually do in concern to this sale of armored vehicles is Canada should stop sending any vehicles out there until our debt is paid off. We say, you owe us $1.8 billion. Pay up, and you're not receiving any until then. And when that happens, cancel the deal right there. Because they're behind. It's not us who has a surplus of money that would have to give back. It's the other way around. They owe us money. So I think that we should play this game, hold them and say, we're not giving you any more armored vehicles, pay up, and then be done with it. Then when they pay up and say, we're done, no more armored vehicles for you. Going on. But Dion, with Alghabra backing, has fought off the criticism. He insists that the contract will not be cancelled and that growing ties with the kingdom would give Canadian politicians more scope with which to raise concerns privately. No, it won't. Not at all. Because this is exactly what Justin Trudeau allegedly tried to do at the G20. He tried to talk to the king, Mohammed bin Salman, about it was either Khashoggi or Raif Badawi. I can't remember which one it is. But that had no effect. They don't care what Canada has to say. We're just tools for them. We're tools for them to get their armored vehicles and for them to sell their oil to. Let's stop all of it. Let's stop all of it coming from Saudi Arabia. I think there's more to this. Oh yeah, this little area right here I highlighted was just because it says we'll go to the phrase above that. Alghabra, however, says he is unfazed by the coverage and flatly denies links to Islamist groups and allegations of anti-Semitism. Quote, have I ever faced prejudice or discrimination doing this job? I can unequivocally say no. Did I face some negative comments based on negative stereotypes or prejudice from social media? Yes, but they are rare in occurrence. Do they represent large groups of Canadians? No. And then it says, to him, the answer is simple. More must be done to promote Canada's perspective and values. Well, the reason I highlight this is mostly because this is the government that said there's no core Canadian identity, there's no Canadian values, pretty much. But then they love talking about what are Canadian values. Inclusiveness, multiculturalism, things like acceptance, tolerance, things such as this. But if you don't have a core Canadian identity, how can you have these values? Just one of the things I wanted to quickly bring up. Okay. And yeah, so what I wanted to quickly bring up is the fact that Omar Alghabra was a big supporter of Motion M103. He put out something out on Twitter that's pretty much stated that the M103 is just as much, calling out Islamophobia is just as Canadian as things such as skating and Tim Hortons, things bullshit such as this. But they don't see that the problem with things such as M103 is that it's putting special privileges above other groups of people. And that is clear by the wording. See, they said no, it doesn't. We focus on all groups. It doesn't have to be just one group. But it is, because as we can see here, this is some of the text of motion M103. It says that in the opinion of the House, the government should what the hell happened? It looks like some of it got cut off. Looked like some of it got cut off. Hold on. Okay. Kind of did. So the government should recognize the need to quell the increased public climate of hate and fear, condemn Islamophobia and all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination. And so that's where it says right there. If they had just said this and said it as we need to condemn all forms of systemic racism, that'd be one thing. But they actually separated and says Islamophobia, putting that first, and then all forms of systemic racism and religious discrimination, putting one group above the other. And then the next one was, this is part of the motion, request that the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage undertake a study on how the government should develop a whole of government approach to reducing and limiting systemic racism and religious discrimination, including Islamophobia, in Canada, while ensuring a community-centered focus with a holistic response through evidence-based policy making. So the problem with this is when they talk about things like that, that's asking the government to install more hate speech laws in Canada. That's exactly what they're doing with this sort of thing. And I never trust people who talk about hate speech laws. Some people say hate speech doesn't exist. I don't actually believe that. I believe hate speech shouldn't be criminalized. That's the problem. Hate speech is such a broad term these days. Well, I actually would say that I consider what is hate speech to be things that are actively going against a certain group or community. For instance, using racial slurs could be quote-unquote considering hate speech, but I don't condemn the criminalization of this because it's only one step farther. And then you broaden the term hate speech, which is actually why I believe many people say hate speech doesn't exist. It's just for the fact that they say that it can be such a broad term, and it really can be. I just think there are specific, very small specific examples where you can actually use the term hate speech. But these are very rare and very far in between, and you will never ever see me actually call something hate speech because of it. I just think you just saying that it doesn't exist is kind of a cop-out. It just seems like you're trying to I don't really know how to describe it. But anyway, moving on. This is it. The whole point is I would never support hate speech laws because I don't support speech laws at whatsoever. I believe in freedom of speech where everybody should have the right to say whatever they're thinking. However, in Canada, we've had hate speech laws just solidified in. As we move on to more about Omar Alghabra, and this is also why, quickly just touching on Iqra Khalid, why I also believe she's playing her part in this is because it was not that long ago, it was a few months ago, that actually it may have been longer than I think, but anyway, we found out that she was giving some $25 million to Muslim groups who had been connected to extremist groups both in America and the Middle East. And this is coming from a woman who's connected to the Muslim Brotherhood. It's absolutely atrocious. So this here says, when Canada meets with the Islamic world, who's calling the shots? And so for this, I was specifically looking for things that come when it comes to Omar Alghabra. And it says, Canadians might scratch their heads and wonder why we even sent a representative. In this case, Liberal Parliamentary Secretary of Foreign Affairs Omar Alghabra, since we are not one of those countries. They're saying... You know what? Let's go back to the stop. It's a little out of context. You've got to wonder who said behind closed doors earlier this week. You've got to wonder what was being said behind closed doors earlier this week by the Canadian delegation that attends a meeting of the world's largest group of Islamic countries. Did everyone find common ground on the top issues of the day? Did we stand up for the progressive views Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is known and love around the world? Who is doing the lobbying and who got lobbied? It would have been something to be a fly on the wall in the 44th session of the Council of Foreign Ministers of Organization of Islamic Cooperation held in Côte d'Ivoire, July 10th and 11th. This is from 2017. The group bills itself as the collective voice of the Muslim world, representing 57 countries. Canadians might scratch their heads and wonder why we were even sent a representative, in this case Liberal Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs, Omar Alghabra, since we are not one of those countries. See, the reason we were there is because there is a plan to Islamize Canada, and I kind of touched on that in my last video. And you can believe that this is exactly what's happening, especially when we have the people in government that we do. I mean, Canada has been, time and time again, has been importing huge amounts of Muslims, and this has ended up happening ever since Justin Trudeau took office. And I've already kind of laid out the plan in my last video. But anyway, this is exactly what ends up happening. This is why Canada was there. And in fact, Canada has now been by many countries seen as a concern, a danger concern, when it comes to jihadis in Canada. Because we're importing ISIS fighters. We're importing people from parts of the world where there are known jihadis, many of them, and then we're taking them to Canada. What do you think's going to happen? Eventually, they're going to come on and it will be Sharia law here in Canada. And Sharia law is actually already an acceptable thing in Canada. Sharia law is allowed when it comes to civil courts, such as divorce. That's a big one. They're allowed in divorce court. All right, and as we move on, CRA sanctioned Islamic charity got job grants, and this has to do with the summer jobs program. A recent sanctioned Islamic organization was awarded a Canada Summer Jobs Grant by the Trudeau government, the Sun has learned. The Islamic Society of North America, Canada, was fined and its charity status suspended last month after an audit by Canada Revenue Agency raised concerns over financial links to armed militias and terrorists in Pakistan. As reported by investigative journalist Stuart Bell of Global News, the Fed suspended the Mississauga-based group charity status for 1 year and fined the group $500,000. CRA auditors revealed ISNA Canada was working as a conduit by using its charitable status in Canada to raise money that may have been knowingly or unknowingly been used to support the effort of a political party and its armed wing, Hizbul Mujahideen. And this goes back to Omar Alghabra because the ISNA Canada Facebook page has shown event photos with Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie, Liberal MP Ikra Khalid, and Omar Alghabra and Ontario PC MPP Sharif Sabawi. So I don't care what your political affiliation is. Being associated with a group such as this is saying a lot. And, oh, look at this right above it. Trudeau spoke at an ISNA Canada event in 2013, and Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale was at an ISNA Canada roundtable in April of this year. And this was, I believe, this year, right? Yeah, this came out on October 3rd, 2018. So there you go. This is very recent. So this is why I believe that Omar Alghabra is one of the main people pushing for this behind the scenes, along with other ones such as Ikra Khalid is another big one. And we know that he supports M103, and we also know that this is that he has also been one people to use Islamophobia as a form of self-defense. This came June 15th. Okay. Do you remember a few months ago, back in June, that the Conservative Party of Canada did a well, I shouldn't actually say it's the Conservative Party of Canada, but the Canadian government had a marathon vote that ran all night where they were just voting on different amendments to, I can't remember which bill it was. And this was because the government was, what was it again? I'm blanking on what was the actual main point behind this. It was the marathon vote in the House of Commons to get the Liberals to reveal the cost of the carbon tax to Canadians. Okay, that's what it was. Well, what ended up happening is this happened to fall on the day of Eid Mubarak, I'm pretty sure. And then because of this, Omar Alghabra ended up accusing the Conservative Party of Canada of being Islamophobic because of it. This is an article out of Spencer Fernando where he covered this. And funny enough, he says he calls them Islamophobic for calling this for calling this this marathon vote, but the timing of the votes was decided by the Liberals. It was a Liberal House leader who scheduled the timing of the vote. So the irony there is so thick. But anyway, as we look through some of the tweets that have been brought in, it says, E. Mubarak, friends, I wish I could celebrate it with you, but Andrew Scheer couldn't set aside partisanship for one day and is forcing votes for 30 hours straight on one of the holiest days for Muslims. Well, it's your job, so do your fucking job. As it goes on. So Aaron O'Toole replied to him and says, both is incorrect and disappointing. The first vote tonight at 10:30 p.m. is due to Liberals-led schedule and Liberal mandates late-night sitting. I think you should apologize for misleading people. And to which his response was, does this mean we will finish voting before the end of the night out to respect for the holidays? Is Andrew Scheer going to be here to show leadership? Which is ironic because Justin Trudeau wasn't there. He showed up later on as well. It's just kind of ironic. But the thing is, too, about this is that Eid might be a holiday to the Muslims, but it's not a national holiday here in Canada. It's not. And it shouldn't be. But then he's acting like this is happening on a national holiday in Canada. Let's see. So Aaron says, it is clear you recognize that your tweet was misleading, Omar. Consider the context. You should really just apologize. He says, you don't believe Islamophobia exists. You disrespect the importance of Eid. You will be voting all night against funding for veterans, RCMP, and CAF members. It is clear who needs to apologize. And this was because they were auditing everything in the Omnibus bill. They were voting on every single part of the Omnibus bill in order to get what it was from... in order to get what they were looking for about the carbon tax. So we've seen how he is connection to Saudi Arabia. He has pushed for policies such as the armored vehicles getting sold to Saudi Arabia. He has pushed for M103. He has used Islamophobia as a weapon. And this, to me, is because it's all a distraction from what they're really trying to do. The whole point of this is in order to push Canada down a certain path, an Islamization path. And this is exactly what people such as Omar Alghabra and Iqra Khalid are doing. And you know what? Even somebody like Ahmed Hussein could be added in there because he's fulfilling the goals of the Open Society Foundation when he just throws open the borders of Canada and lets anybody come in. And, hey, don't worry about it. We'll take care of you. And I want to end off today just talking real quickly about, actually, I'm going to show you a quick video. And then there's another one I show you. It's just on last topic. And then we're done. So this one, and take it for what you will, it's supposed to be Justin Trudeau converting to Islam. Now, there is a theory out there that Justin Trudeau has made the conversion. There's also a theory that his brother has also converted to Islam, which wouldn't surprise me considering how much support he puts behind the Muslim faith. I have not been able to find evidence yet to say that this is definitively true. But the fact that many Muslim leaders around the world and imams and such have praised Justin Trudeau for being a friend to Islam is saying a lot. Justin Trudeau has clearly been compromised by one group of people. So anyway, we'll just take a quick look, not throughout the whole video. There's just a certain key point that I want to highlight. But there was nothing in this video that I could find that actually said that he had converted to Islam. But I'm not ruling it out. All right, let's take a quick look at this.
Is a time to reflect on the values of empathy, generosity, compassion, charity, but also discipline that are not just Muslim values, but Canadian values. We are, all of us in this country, incredibly lucky to be in the one place around the world that has managed to define itself as strong, not in spite of our differences, but well because of them. We come here, much like the Muslim community. Canadians have their origins in every corner of the world. And we are defined as a country.
So first thing I want to point out is that he's propagating this idea that Muslim values are compatible with Canadian values and Western values when they're really not. There's too many differences in there to actually say that they are compatible. But the thing is, for me, that kind of stood out was the fact that he talked about Muslim values and then Canadian values. Oh, he names off a few and then says things like compassion. It says these are not just Muslim values, but Canadian values. Shouldn't it be the other way around? You're supposed to be a Canadian first, but he panders to these groups such as this. And if he has done this and he has actually converted to Islam, then we know why. We know why he put that first. And I could see it for sure. I mean, why else would Canada be at these meetings that are for Muslim countries? Because it's now a Muslim country, or it's on its way to become an Islamized Muslim country. And you have a Muslim leader leading you. These are all allegations, nothing to back it up right now, but I think it says a lot. And the last thing I just want to quickly finish up on today is this video here that only came out a little while ago. This one was uploaded December 18th. And what Justin Trudeau says when it comes to people who are, quote-unquote, anti-immigration or against migration is concerning, to say the least. It is in French, but there are English subtitles there, so you can read it for anybody who doesn't understand French. So let's go.
Beaucoup observé les Gilets jaunes en France depuis ces dernières journées. Ce week-end, au Canada, dans 4 villes, il y a eu des manifestants avec des dossards jaunes aussi qui manifestaient contre la fameuse taxe carbone qui a été présentée il n'y a pas si longtemps et aussi l'immigration. Est-ce que ça vous inquiète de voir un début de mouvement comme celui-là dans certaines villes canadiennes?
Bien, je trouve que les politiciens conservateurs ont vraiment joué pour alimenter une approche qui se désengage surtout par rapport à l'environnement. Tu sais, ici, au Québec, il y a un consensus sur l'environnement, mais il faudrait demander aux 11 députés conservateurs du Québec c'est quoi leur plan.
Vous pensez que les conservateurs sont derrière les Gilets jaunes dans ces villes-là?
Je pense que les conservateurs sont en train de jouer des jeux dangereux par rapport à alimenter cette controverse. On a vu ça aussi avec le compact global sur l'immigration. Andrew Scheer qui est en train de dire « Ah non, on va perdre notre souveraineté ». Ça n'a rien à voir avec ça, mais il est en train de faire de la mésinformation assez agressive. Puis c'est dangereux dans une société quand on commence à jouer sur les émotions et qu'on laisse tomber les faits.
Donc, vous ne croyez pas que ce mouvement-là va prendre de l'ampleur dans d'autres villes canadiennes pour l'instant?
Je sais que la grande majorité des Canadiens savent qu'on doit agir sur l'environnement et ils savent que l'immigration est une source de croissance économique pour notre pays et non de faiblesse. Pour la majorité des gens, c'est ça. Mais il y a une minorité qui se fait de plus en plus vocale qui va falloir surveiller.
Écoutez aussi, évidemment.
Oui, mais surveiller.
Prenons une minute.
So, first thing is that the reporters were saying that these protests were against immigration. It was against the Global Compact for Migration that he was actually specifically making reference to, but he doesn't say this. He just says against migration. Most of the people that were against the Global Compact for Migration are not anti-immigrants, say shut down the borders altogether. They prefer legal immigration, something that Justin Trudeau has apparently forgotten. But then what he says there at the end, actually, just quickly to go on a little more about the Global Compact for Migration, is that it is doing so has solidified migration as a human right in the Western world, which means that it's now these nations that need to accommodate to people who want to come to Canada, not the other way around. And he says most Canadians agree with him when it comes to immigration as a form of strength. Most people disagree with the numbers that he wants to bring in. He's upped it to 350,000. They've talked about how they want to bring it up to 100 million Canadians by the year 2100. This is a huge increase. But what was really startling to me is what he says there at the end, where he says that, oh, this is just a vocal minority, and they'll have to be monitored. And then the reporter even says, well, and listened to, right? He says, yeah, but monitored. So now he's going to monitor you if you don't agree with his point of view. This is literally something that sounds like it's coming out of communist China. This sounds like the type of censorship and the type of surveillance that they have. I'm seriously waiting for him to implement this social credit system that's in China. That if you are from one a dissident in China, then you are not allowed certain what should be rights but benefits, we'll say, such as the ability to move. Because in China you're constantly surveilled wherever you go with technology that can map out your face, so they always know where you are and where you're going. But it's even been proven that people who don't have a high enough social credit are then not able to buy things such as a train ticket in order to go around. So this is what it worries me when he talks about this, that it sounds very similar to what we're seeing there, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is the future that he's moving to, which is an extremely dystopian future, and we already see how he's planning to monitor things such as social media. In fact, they even came out a while ago and said they want to start monitoring social media in real time. So everything that Justin Trudeau does is about censorship. Everything he does is about monitoring the Canadian people, more specifically monitoring those that don't agree with his point of view. And that, to me, is a really scary precedent to set. So I did actually have more that I wanted to discuss, but we're about an hour and 16 now, so I'm going to sign off for the day. I want to thank you all for joining me on the True North Report. This is news that every Canadian needs to know, and I'll be back soon with another report for you.